G'day guys, timer is on, ready to go. Today I'm going to be talking about recovery principles. I got some more people entering the group yesterday on Facebook, the STEPN Injury Prevention group. If you're not part of it already, jump on board and join us, because that's where you can have a say in what topics you'd like me to be covering in these daily episodes. I've had a few more votes on the poll in there, and recovery principles is currently top of the list. So if you do join, there's a question as you enter about topics for the podcast. Otherwise, there's a Q&A section in the featured posts, and there's also the poll if you don't want to ask a specific, but would just like to nudge it in a certain direction with topics. So I'm going to do an overview of recovery because it is such a big topic and such an important topic as well, because I think it's really common for people when they first get into exercise that they think that that when you're training hard, that's when you're getting the benefits, the adaptations, the increase in strength and fitness. But the interesting thing about the body is that if you do get the stimulus there, but it's in the recovery that you actually get the adaptation. So a lot of people really focus on just the stimulus and then don't think about the recovery at all, and that can really limit the benefits that you get from doing your hard training, or not so hard training, as plenty of training should be. So understanding that equation that stimulus plus recovery equals adaptation, and really focusing on optimizing both the stimulus and the recovery, it's just going to give you such better results than just focusing on the training alone. There's some really good studies been done in looking into runners, actually, particularly looking at training loads between and performance between amateur runners, elite runners, and professional runners. And the kind of long story short takeaway is that the elite runners and the professional runners did the same amount of time training. Like, there's only so much training you can do in a week that is productive, because otherwise you end up just being so fatigued that you're not able to push yourself, and you end up just putting yourself at risk of injury, and because you just don't have the time for recovery. So the study showed that basically, like, obviously amateur runners aren't going to be spending quite as much time, but the people in that sort of elite category were doing just as much as professionals, but because they weren't able to recover as effectively as professionals, because with professionals, if that's their full-time job, they can be, apart from maybe some media appearances and some like small amounts of work outside of their running, they can spend the rest of the day eating, sleeping, de-stressing, doing some active recovery protocols to really maximize their adaptation to the stress that they put on their body. Whereas for the elite runners, where that's not actually their job, they're training really hard and they want to get a good result, but they're having to go to work, probably like train really early in the morning, go to work the rest of the day, maybe just squeeze in some time for takeaway lunch in the middle of the day, and then get back and maybe have family commitments, might have to stay up late to deal with family commitments and hopefully spend some time with their significant others, that kind of thing. Basically, if you don't have those elites, just didn't have the same ability to recover as the professionals, and that was reflected in their peak performance. So although they were able to train just as much, they were never able to reach the same level of intensity and therefore performance that the professionals could reach. And so I think it just really highlights just so well that to really improve that recovery part of the equation is just so key, and should be a real focus, particularly if you are now running every day, because I think one of the amazing things about STEPN is it does give you that incentive and that habit, which is often the hardest thing to build, is building a habit of exercise. But it does it's hard to not go out and earn your tokens on the day. So it probably is prompting people to do more than their body is ready for on the programming side of things. So particularly early on, as your body is adapting to that kind of baseline of daily exercise, really focusing on your recovery is going to make that much more likely that you won't injure yourself. Just while I'm talking about injuries, remember, this isn't specific medical advice. Like, I haven't worked with anyone listening to this podcast individually. So please do use this as information to then guide your own interactions with health professionals. If you are interested in working with me, I do online consultations. And if you want to know more, head to the Facebook group and get in contact with me there. But just today we're going to do a bit of an overview of different like the kind of big buckets of recovery, so the big themes. And this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, and my thinking has changed slightly with it, and the classification of it has slightly changed. And if I do say something slightly different in the future, that's just going to be an evolution of thinking. It's not that that anything's like wrong or changed, but basically just trying to classify it in slightly different ways. So what I would the way I like to think about it is basically the big one. The first category is going to be your sleep. So optimizing your sleep. So that's going to be duration and quality, not just duration. So thinking about how to get the most out of your sleep. And there's so many different, that's been a real point of interest for me, and a lot of experimentation for me over the last few years, especially to try and really optimize my sleep. Because when you are asleep, that's when you do get a lot of that's the biggest part for recovery of both your brain and your body. So people might have heard of sleep stages, and the idea that you've got deep sleep, light sleep, REM sleep, which is the rapid eye movement sleep. And so when you're in the deep sleep phase, that's when you're getting a lot of your physical recovery happening. And when you're in the REM sleep, that's when you're getting a lot of your kind of processing of thoughts, your learning, your kind of all the more the brain side functions are really processing and recovering. So it's really key to understand that sleep quality is key to get. If you're waking up and you're really restless all night, you may be sleeping for a decent duration, but if you're waking up feeling wiped out and fatigued every day, then you're probably not going to have the best results. So that's something that I can talk about more in the future if people are interested, and I probably will, because I find it fascinating and it does have a huge result. So sleep being the first big category, nutrition is going to be the second. And so basically what you're eating and when you're eating it, because both quality and timing are really important. So thinking about nutrition, like I'm not a nutritionist, so please don't, if you do want to dive deeper into nutrition, work with a professional. My background's physio and sports science, so have done a lot of biochemistry and some nutrition subjects, and it's a point of great interest for me, but again, not a registered nutritional professional. So the big ways to think about it is basically your total caloric or kilojoule intake. So are you at a deficit where you might be losing weight? Are you at a maintenance level where you're at about what your body needs to basically getting like energy neutral for the day, or are you at a surplus? So are you likely to put on weight either in fat or muscle, depending on the stimulus? So there's that kind of big picture to look at, just pure energy intake. Then there's going to be the macronutrients. So your macronutrients are basically your fat, protein, and carbohydrates as the big macronutrients. Alcohol also has a slightly different pathway, so we'll throw that one in there as well. But basically, getting the right balance between those macronutrients will have a big impact on your body. So you'll have a pretty different outcome if you get, most of your calories from fat versus sugar versus protein. So that's something you could dive deeper into later if people are interested. But I think probably the big one is to understand that depending on the intensity that you're working at, you're going to have different demands on those systems. So if you're working at a really high intensity, carbohydrates and sugar are going to be the predominant fuel. So being able to support that nutritionally is really important. Whereas if you're in that kind of low intensity, that steady state, zone 2 cardio that I talked about in previous episodes, where you're able to hold a conversation, nasal breathe, you're really using more of your aerobic system, which is predominantly fueled by fat. So just understanding the differences there, and then how you eat will really change how you feel during a race and or a run, and the length of time. Like if you're running for a long period of time, thinking about fueling within the race or the run is really important, which I definitely learned during my recent marathon and half Ironman race. Now, micronutrients as a whole, the next kind of section of nutrition. So that's basically like vitamins, minerals, all of that jazz. And so high quality, nutrient dense food is going to give your body a very different, composition of that compared to eating highly processed food that's maybe not so nutrient dense. Won't dive into that now, just to give an overview. So stress management is going to be the next one, because basically like your exercise is a stress, and if you're getting lots of stress during your exercise, and then you're adding lots of stress at work and stress in your home life, maybe some financial stress, particularly how crypto is going. There's the timer. I'll finish up really soon, but I'll just finish off these categories. Then that can be problematic. Now, the body likes stress. It's what causes adaptation, but you need to be able to basically give stress plus recovery, just like that. Stimulus plus recovery equals adaptation. So being able to manage your stress outside of your exercise is really key to having a good response from that. And so you make it a positive impact on your body rather than something that gradually just exhausts you, wears you down, and leads to a bad result. So there's lots of different stress mitigation strategies that are really relevant in exercise and sport. So we'll be talking about that more in the future, and it's something that professional athletes are really, if you follow any sports closely, you'll see that that's becoming a larger and larger part of sports performance. Is things like mindfulness, things like meditation, yoga, all of that jazz. Even like acutely around exercise, kind of trying to put the clamp on some of the stress hormones really quickly after exercise, so you can then get a better recovery from it. But again, don't have time to jump into that now. So this is where I've sort of added these other categories of one's basically active recovery. So that's the idea of doing behaviors or activities like either really low intensity exercise that can aid in recovery, like walking or spinning on a bike, or something like yoga. So these active things that you are doing for yourself. And then there's going to be sort of passive modalities like getting a massage. When you talk about like foam rolling and gentle stretching, that might, you could kind of argue whether that comes into like if foam roller is similar to massage, is that an active or a passive? Anyway, don't get caught up in the details. Basically, there's those buckets that I will be talking about more in the future as well. But hopefully that kind of gives you an insight into there's lots of different avenues that you can go with recovery, and it's sort of one of those things that you really want to get the big pillars right. So the big ones are getting enough and good enough quality sleep, getting your nutrition in the ballpark of being right. They're the really big ones that are like most people just need to get right. And then looking at stress management is seemingly more and more important, and then thinking about those active and passive modalities that can really start to be that sort of optimization side of things, not just your fundamentals. But I've been planning on putting together like a recovery hierarchy to basically give people guidance on like, if you're going to just do a few things, do this, and that will get you most of the way there. And then sort of what are your kind of like 5%ers, and then what are your 1%ers. So if people are interested in that, just let me know in the group, and I can put that forward on the things to do list. Hopefully found this useful and interesting. If you do have specific recovery questions, do jump onto the STEPN Injury Prevention Facebook group and ask specific questions. But otherwise, I'll be going through each of those categories in more detail in separate episodes. So hopefully that was helpful. Happy running. I'm going to go for my run now, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.